And he looks at encouragement in chapter 12. But the question I want to ask you tonight, and if I call on you to discuss, please discuss. I'll let you take a drink of tea. Who qualifies for encouragement? Everyone. But do we always do that? Well, I agree with you. We do. Everybody qualifies. Everybody should be encouraged. But do we encourage everybody? Why is that, do you think? We fail? What's that? We'll talk about it and see if we can't maybe identify it. But ladies and gentlemen, we have a tendency to turn on and turn off encouragement. We really do. Well, this is somebody I want to encourage. This is somebody that's really fun to be with, and I'm going to encourage them. I'm not going to encourage her. I'm not going to. Somebody else can do that. We do that, and that is wrong. It is not at all what we see in Christ. Not at all what we see in Christ. If you're following along, you know that he's going to identify 3 individuals tonight. And we'll talk more about that in detail. But let's consider the activities of an encourager. Remember, we've looked at how encouragement is a ministry. We did that several weeks ago. We talked about how we need to it takes courage. It takes courage to be an encourager. And if we do not encourage, just by the sheer nature of it, we are discouragers. So we want to avoid that. And we need to always consider the possibilities, what we could be doing as encouragers. We've looked at the mind, we looked at the eyes, the ears, the mouth, the hands, and what are those? What's the anatomy of an encourager? And then this month, we looked at group encouraging and how we can encourage as a whole group. And Nehemiah was a wonderful example with that. How he took the entire Israelite nation and helped focus them towards encouragement. And then last week, we scaled it down on the individual level. When Barnabas, the son of encouragement, takes a young preacher, John Mark, and encourages him on an individual one-on-one basis. And the ramifications of that encouragement. So, as we've looked at this, we've talked about Nehemiah and group encouraging. We talked about Barnabas and the one-on-one. This evening, we're going to look at what Aubrey Johnson calls the archetype of encouragement, and that's Jesus Christ himself. How we can stop turning on and turning off encouragement is when we do what he does and we start to see beyond the individual. When we start to realize this is a soul. This person that I might not necessarily agree with, this is a soul that Jesus Christ died for. And who am I to flip the switch off and say, I'm not going to encourage them? I don't have that. I cannot take that. We've got to be able to see through the eyes of our Savior and look at people and encourage people by what Jesus did. Oftentimes we say, well, what you see is what you get. The truth is, what we see is often what we are looking for. Too many times what we're looking for is what we get. Did you know what happens this summer? This summer is the Olympics. This summer is going to be the Olympics. And I wanted to throw this out to you as we're talking about the encouragement for this reason. Who are you going to root for? Go USA. Of course we will. That's our team. And that's what we're going to cheer for. And well, we should. Well, we should encourage them on to victory. But let me ask you a question. What happens when our team wins? We wave the flag, we cheer, that's great. But what happens? What happens when our team loses?
We badmouth the other guy.
We lick our wounds and we badmouth the other guy. Oh, man. Why don't we cheer for the bad guys? Did I just say that out loud? Why don't we encourage our opponents? You see, we don't do that because that's not what we want. And I know I'm taking some liberties as I'm talking about this, because I grew up a diehard Dallas Cowboy fan. And I bled blue and silver. And whenever I would get the football cards, My grandma was the best. She'd buy me cards every time she went to Piggly Wiggly. But I remember getting those football cards, and I'd open them, and sometimes I would get a winner. And sometimes it'd be a team that I really liked. And maybe sometimes it was the Oilers, and Houston's okay. But every now and again, I'd get those pesky old Pittsburgh Steelers. And I don't know about you, but back in the 70s, Pittsburgh was not the team we rooted for. But I've still got those cards, albeit they have dart holes in them. You see, when we have somebody that we don't want to encourage, we don't encourage them. We flip off the switch. We put them aside. It's not the way Jesus did it. It's not the way Jesus encourages us and teaches us. I kind of feel a little inadequate with this, especially since Dr. Duvall stepped in just a little bit ago. Because what we're going to look at this evening, and the way Aubrey Johnson takes this, is we're going to look at the charts, the medical charts of 3 individuals. And what do we find that Jesus found? And the way Aubrey Johnson does it, and the way he takes it, and I think it's pretty good, is medically speaking, what does a doctor do if he wants to find out how a person is doing internally? He tests the blood. Why does he do that? Maybe I should call on Aaron for this question. Why do they take a blood test? Can I pick on you, Aaron?
What's going on in the body, or what the body reacting to, or to help the mind to stay in the body.
To find out if there's some abnormalities, or if everything's looking like it should. And if there's abnormalities, there's some problems we need to take care of. But everything's looking good, then we're doing good. We're going to Jesus, in essence, is going to show us how we can look and find out what's not normal and how can we work past this. But when we look at people, I can look at blood through a microscope. I don't have a clue what I'm doing. Aaron would. But I have no idea. But when I look at people, what do I see? Do I see what I want to see? Do I paint them in the picture that I expect them to be? Or do I see them through the eyes of Jesus? Do I see them the way that Jesus would? So you see, sometimes when we look at people, we make a decision. And we say, well, that guy's hopeless. He's a homeless guy. He's probably a beggar. He's probably selfish. I mean, he's in that situation. He's probably looking out for his own self. He may even be rude. That's why he's in the spot that he's at. Sometimes, I'm afraid what we do is we say, well, they're not like me. And that's out of my comfort zone. And so we have a tendency to turn the switch off. I can't help with that. That's beyond what I do. Maybe we'd be better off focusing on the cure rather than disease. Maybe we'd be better off pulling the charts from some of Jesus' patients. So get your Bibles handy, because we're about to start doing some reading. And you will be reading. I'm not going to be reading them. So get your Bibles, and let's start with John chapter 1. John chapter 1, this is going to be our first chart that we're going to look at. And you probably know what's happening in this one already. This is when Jesus is beginning his ministry and calling his disciples. And who will read John chapter 1, 40, 41, and 42? Just 3 verses. Daniel, go ahead.
41 and 2?
Yes, sir.
One of the 2 who heard John speak and followed him was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He first found his brother Simon and said to him, "We have found the Messiah," which is translated anointed. He brought Simon to Jesus, who looked at him and said, "You are Simon, son of John. You are to be called Cephas," which is translated Peter.
Did you catch what Jesus is doing? He's pulling out the chart. They said, look, there's Jesus. We found the Messiah. We found the one we're going to follow. Come on, let's meet him. And they make the introductions, and Jesus says to Peter, he says, "You shall be called Cephas." What do your footnotes say Cephas is? What does it mean? What is it? Rock. So Jesus was saying, man, you're Cephas, you're rock. That must mean that you got some pretty strong muscles. You're rock hard, abs, right? Is that what it was? Was Peter pretty stout? I don't know, but I doubt it. Well, maybe as the people were listening to Jesus calling him Cephas, they said, "Oh yeah, he's a rock head. He's stubborn." And we know some of Peter's actions would have made people think that way. He's pretty ambitious, pretty stubborn. Maybe that's, is that what Jesus is saying? Is Jesus saying, Peter, you're going to be a stone. You're going to be a boulder. Ladies and gentlemen, we know the answer to that. And all of those are not right. What was Jesus saying when he said, you shall be called Cephas, you shall be called stone, you shall be called rock? What was he saying? I'm going to come back to you, Paul, so I can get your... You're going to be steadfast. Very good. What else, Paul?
He's going to hang in there, and he's going to continue on with them. He's
You're
going to stand firm in his belief.
He was seeing Peter's potential.
He was seeing his potential. See, that's key. Because remember, he's got the charts. See, we would have said, well, he's impulsive. He's aggressive. He's rough. That's why he's calling him a rock. No, Jesus was seeing what Peter's potential was. Jesus could see that he wasn't unstable. Even though Peter's going to deny Christ, he understands that. Perhaps what we need to realize is Jesus is looking beyond what we see. And he saw a man who had great potential to be steadfast.
That's where we get the wise man on the rock song.
Very good. Wise man built his house. We can also go to Matthew to pick that one up, can't we? Very good. This is not that song that Eric is referencing, but turn to Matthew chapter 16. Let's take a look at this real quick. This is still with Peter. This is still an interaction with Peter and Christ. Who will take these 4 verses for me? 13, 14, 15, and 16. Who's got those? Go ahead, buddy. Go ahead.
When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, who do the people say the Son of Man is? They replied, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. But what about you? He asked. Who do you say I am? Simon Peter answered, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God.
You know, that is the rock that Jesus built his church upon. That's the statement. When Christ says in the next verse, if Aaron kept reading, on this rock I will build. It was this statement. It's this foundation that's not going to move. And it's being said by the rock. When Jesus said to him, who do you say I am? Peter gives us the rock answer that carries us through the generations. You are the Christ. You're the Son of the living God. Turn to John chapter 6. I want you to pick up these verses. There's only 4 of them here again. John chapter 6, verses 66 through 69. Who will read these? Will you read it for me, buddy? Go ahead. Read out really loud so I can hear you.
From that time, many of his disciples went back and walked with him no more. Then Jesus said to the 12, Do you also want to go away? But Simon Peter answered him, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. Also we have come to believe and know that you are the Christ, the Son of the living God.
I love this passage. Because if you know the background about what's happening here, Jesus is telling his disciples, and yes, it was a very good job, buddy. Jesus has just told his disciples, you know, if you want to be a part of me, you're going to have to eat my flesh and drink my blood. And those followers, not the 12 apostles, the disciples, the followers said, you're talking cannibalism. I'm out of here. I'm not going to do that. And they started leaving. The scripture says they started leaving him. That's too heavy. Can't follow that stuff. And Jesus then, as they're walking out, Jesus turns to his apostles, to his disciples. He says, you're not going to leave also, are you? And I love the statement that's said next. To whom shall we go? We don't have any other place to go. It's almost, in my eyes, it's almost as if the disciples are saying in desperation, we don't understand what you're telling us, but we don't have any other option. We're staying here. To whom shall we go? And then you read there in verse 69 or 68. Peter says, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. We have heard, we have believed, and we have come to know that you are the Holy One of God. You see, that's coming from somebody that Jesus said, you are Cephas. That's why he said you are the rock. Because of statements like that, because of statements like Matthew chapter 16, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. That's where I stand. And Jesus said, you are Peter, you are a rock. People will follow that. And they did. They still do. You know, I like this statement here. And I'll read it to you because it's kind of hard to see from back there, I think. This is from Positive Thinking. I refuse to allow my limitations to stop me. I refuse to give up. I am determined to succeed. That's what that line is right there. Do we have that opinion? I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to give up. Even though things are tough, even though things are difficult, I'm not quitting. Peter wasn't going to quit. There was times when he had struggles, yes. He denied Christ. I don't know him. I don't know him. I don't know him. And then he realized, I do know him and I messed up. Ladies and gentlemen, just because we make some mistakes doesn't mean we've quit. It means we struggle through those, and we struggle through those together because God gave us this family. But when you have struggles, consider what you've got underneath you, the legs that you can stand on. And Jesus Christ, he is your support. You will succeed in Christ if you don't quit, if you don't give up, if you stay solid as a rock. But see, that was Peter. What if Jesus hadn't have followed that blood test? What if Jesus had said, yeah, that guy's he's a little impetuous. I can see in the future, and I know he's going to try to cut off a guy's head. I better not bring him on. Yeah, he's going to sink. He's going to walk on water for a couple of steps, and he's going to sink. He's going to cry for me to save him. Yes, sir.
You got to remember, he's the only one that got out of the boat.
The only one. The only one. And when he realized he didn't have the success, he said, Lord, save me. He knew where to go. So Jesus sees beyond, ladies and gentlemen, what we can see. Let's look at another chart. Let's look at the next one on here. This is one of his disciples, Matthew, which I think it's a strong one. Matthew chapter 16. Go ahead and turn there. Matthew 16, verses 13 through 16. Just 4 short verses. If you know anything about Matthew, you know this. He was not one of the good guys. He was part of the IRS. He was a tax collector. How many of you get excited when you get a letter in the mail or a phone call from the Yes. Yeah, you're not going, oh, good, I hope to hear from the IRS again this year. I got audited last year. Maybe I can get another one of those. When you get that, that's not something that you get giddy about. It's not something that you're looking forward to. In this time period, with the tax collectors during the Rome rule, the tax collector, the Matthews, were considered the scum of society. They were no good. Matter of fact, listen to this. I thought this was interesting. They were looked upon as traitors. They were considered to be political prostitutes. Their loyalty could be bought. A tax collector was not welcome in a Jewish home. A tax collector was not allowed in the synagogue. And they would avoid him on the streets. That kind of does sound like the IRS, doesn't it? And even his testimony in a Jewish court was disallowed because he lacked credibility and was seen as one who would say or do anything for profit. That was Matthew. Who's got Matthew chapter? No, I don't want anything to do with them. I don't want to have anything to do with them. Both in that time period and quite honestly in today's time period. Now, I don't want taxes. I got to pay them, but if they're coming to my door, I don't want to have to deal with that. Matthew chapter 9, verse 9. I was thinking it was a different passage, but I think that's correct. Matthew chapter 9. I'm actually going to take you to, let's do verse 9, but I want to read 9 through 13. So there's 5, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 5 verses there. Who will read those for me? Go ahead.
And as Jesus passed on from there, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax office, and he said to him, "Follow me." And he rose and followed him. And it happened that as he was reclining at the table in the house, behold, many tax gatherers and sinners came and were dining with Jesus and his disciples. And when the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, "Why is your teacher eating with tax gatherers and sinners?" But when he heard this, he said, "Is it not those who are healthy who need a physician?" It is not those who are healthy who need a physician, but those who are sick. But go and learn what this means. I desire compassion and not sacrifice, for I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners.
I love this passage. This is another really good one. That verse 9 of chapter 9 is so striking. Here's the guy, and I can kind of visualize him. I can see him standing at his desk, and he probably has an assistant with him, and he's making bank. People are coming, and they're making their payments. Most, I would think, begrudgingly. And Jesus goes up to him, not because he's going to pay his taxes, but Jesus goes up to him, and he says to him very simply, "Follow me." Follow me? Why would he say that to someone who is, remember, scum of the society? Are you kidding me? You want this cheat following you? And you know what happened. Matthew leaves his stuff. He leaves his office. He changes his job. I don't know if he had an apron, but he took his stuff off and put it there, and he followed Jesus. And with his excitement, he invited who? Invited his friends. Oh, they're tax collectors too. They're scum of the earth as well. Go ahead and come on in. And Jesus dines with them. And the Pharisees, the rulers, yes sir, go ahead.
I wonder, what did Matthew do with the money he had in front of him? Because it says he got up and followed him.
I've thought about that too, Paul. Really, the only thing I can think of is there had to have been some kind of an assistant, maybe, and he said, "This is yours. I'm done." I don't know. That's just guessing. But yeah, he left it. It's kind of like when Peter or James and John, and they remember when they were casting out, and they made the mother lode of all fish catches, and Jesus said, "Come with me," and they left it. They made bank. Every one of those fish that were in that net that was getting ripped, every one of those fish were money. Every one of them. And there were so many, the boat was beginning to sink. You're talking, you had lots of cash. And they left it to follow Jesus. He left it. He left his job to follow Jesus. And then you know what the Pharisees said. Are you crazy? Do you not see? Do you not know who you just got on your side? Lord, this is the guy you want to follow you? And then we read 12 and 13. And Jesus' response was very simple. I didn't come to call righteous. Jesus said, I'm not blind to this. I'm not just kind of going out there thinking. He sees, and he sees potential. And Jesus is encouraging people who need encouragement. Matthew could have just kept going right on. Still collecting, probably still rolling further and further into disrepair. But Jesus saw his potential. He saw his spiritual sickness. When we see people that look like not like us, do we concern ourselves with them? Or do we say, well, somebody will help them? Turn to Matthew chapter 9, if you will. Oh, wait, that's what we just read, wasn't it? All right, let's look at it again. It is not those who are healthy who need a physician. It's those who are sick. 291 in your songbook. Take a look at that real quick. Song number 291. You can pick up your number 2 favorite book. Take a look there. I know I don't do this very often. We're not going to sing it. You can tell why, but just listen to my voice. But we've sung this song for years. The great physician now is near, the sympathizing Jesus. Take a look at the words of this poem. He speaks the drooping heart to cheer. Oh, hear the voice of Jesus. All glory to the dying Lamb. I now believe in Jesus. I love the blessed Savior's name. I love the name of Jesus. I love his name dispels my guilt and fear. There's no other name but Jesus. Oh, how my soul delights to hear the charming name of Jesus. And when to that bright world above we rise to see our Jesus, we'll sing around the throne of love his name, the name of Jesus. It's the sweetest note in Seraph's song, the angel's song. Sweetest name on mortal tongue. It's the sweetest carol that was ever sung, the name of Jesus. He is the one who brings us healing. And ladies and gentlemen, he sees what we need. If we are to be like Christ, if you and I are children of God and we are to be disciples of Christ, we should be looking through his eyes at this world that's dying and lost. We need to get outside of our comfort zone because Jesus got down on his knees to help people who need him. He made blind men to see their potential. He took crippled people to be able to help them to see their potential to walk again. We can't heal in that aspect. But ladies and gentlemen, we can bring hope. We can bring hope to a hopeless world. If we don't do it, if we don't bring hope to this world, tell me, who will? You have Jesus Christ. Let's look through his eyes. Let's go to the third chart. This is the last one that Aubrey Johnson pulls out for us, but I thought it was a pretty good one. As we consider this last medical chart, I want us to read about the adulterous woman. And you've read this story. You've read it for years. John chapter 8. And this is the longer reading. It's 1 through 11. John chapter 8. And you probably know this one pretty much by heart. But ladies and gentlemen, it never hurts for us to reread it again. Begin in verse 1, John chapter 8, and take us all the way through all 12 of those verses. Who's got that for me?
Now early in the morning he came again into the temple, and all the people came to him, and he sat down and taught them. And the scribes and the Pharisees brought to him a woman caught in adultery. And when they had set her in the midst, they said to him, Teacher, this woman was caught in adultery in the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. But what do you say? This they said, testing him, that they might have something of which to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down and wrote on the ground with his finger, as though he did not hear. So when they continued asking him, he raised himself up and said to them, He who is without sin among you, let him throw a stone at her first. And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. And those that heard it, being convicted by their conscience, went out one by one, beginning with the oldest, even to the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. When Jesus had raised himself up and saw no one but the woman, he said to her, Woman, where are those accusers of yours? Has no one condemned you? She said, No one, Lord. And Jesus said to her, Neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more.
What do you think Jesus meant when he said, neither do I condemn you? What do you think he meant by that?
I think he knew she was repentant.
Okay.
I don't think he meant that the sin wasn't a sin. But I think she, in being caught and brought before him, was repentant.
I think Eric, that's a great point, because we have a tendency to say, and I've said this, well, Jesus saw what I can't see. And that's true. He sees the heart. He sees the potential. All we see is what we see. But do we let that be our deciding factor? And so he may very well have said, this woman's got a heart of repentance. But when he said to her, neither do I condemn you, he was saying, all these people that were ready to kill you, they walked off. They said, we're not going to condemn her. They dropped their stones and they walked off. I do not think, as Eric was alluding to, I do not think Jesus was saying, well, you're innocent. Because she's not innocent. She's guilty. She was caught in the act. But there's a difference between saying, well, you're innocent or you're guilty. Let God make that call. But in this situation, Jesus says, neither do I condemn you. He was looking at her potential. I think sometimes with this story, we get caught up on the fact that Jesus is writing in the dirt. We talk about what that might have been. I think it's important for us not to worry about what he wrote, but think about what Jesus saw in her. Jerry, you had a thought.
You know, and it doesn't tell us this, and I'm speculating, but she very well could have been this whole time saying, forgive me, forgive me, forgive me. Because I don't think the whole conversation between all these people was real nice, sweet, and calm, one-on-one. I think everybody was talking at once. And I think she probably might even have been asking for that forgiveness.
Well, what blows me away with this one here, if she was caught in the act, doesn't it take two to tango? Shouldn't there have been somebody else dragged out there as well? See, this is a setup. This is set up. We've got somebody that's not like us. We've got someone that looks different. And we can make a point. Because really the ultimate objective was to get Jesus. That was the point. And they've been doing that for a long time as you read through the scripture. Their objective is to get rid of him. And this is just another opportunity. And again, in Jesus' classic form, he shoots them down. And he does it with humility and compassion. And at the same time, he saves somebody. He sees the potential. He sees the potential.
Trying to tell you, you can see other people's faults, but you can't see your own.
That's right. That's right. Look at what's going on in the whole situation, Aaron.
Jesus and this woman, we seem to kind of focus on them. But you know, everybody that's standing around there holding a stone had a different perspective on that when they first showed up. They were ready to stone her. They were ready to judge her. And then they were convicted when he said, you know, ye without sin cast the first stone. They realized, I shouldn't be standing here, you know. And so, everybody in that crowd had a change of heart too. You know, there was a life lesson for all of them as well.
And I can't help but wonder if maybe some of the first ones to drop their stones were some of the older men. Go ahead.
Again, speculation. But I've always kind of thought he probably was writing somebody's name and then writing a sin, or somebody else's name and a sin, or he might have just been listed sins that every one of them had committed.
Well, that's exactly right. We have, considering the fact that Jesus knew what people were thinking, he could have very well been doing that. So the point of the matter is the older, more wiser men realized, I got sin. I can't do this. I can't help but wonder if some of the young whippersnappers were holding on for a little bit longer. Wait, where are you guys going? We got one here. We can take care of this. We can see blood tonight. And they said, no, and we got sin. And I can't help but wonder if Jesus is saying, start to think about what you're doing. It's not just about identifying somebody who's different and establishing your pecking order, your decision. You see what happens, he wasn't saying she was innocent. He was saying you got sin, and that's why he said, go and sin no more. Stop this behavior. You know what's right and you know what's wrong. Do what's right. But unfortunately, and this happens for all of us, it really, really does. And I'm not trying to be mean here. But when we see things that look askew, when we see things that don't look like they should be, we start to pile on. Oh yeah, let's get on this one. And the bandwagon starts to it gets worse and worse and worse. And I can't help but think during that time when Christ was being tried, and they were all yelling what? Crucify him! Crucify him! If you read closely in the passages, that's a stirring up of what the Pharisees and Sadducees were doing. They were going, they were getting the crowd, they were piling on. We can do that if we're not careful with our negativeness. We can be discouraged. Remember, discouragement doesn't have to be intentional. Discouragement can be unintentional. I didn't mean to do that. Well, if you're not encouraging, you're discouraging. And sometimes I think we have a tendency to pile on with our words, not just our actions. That rejection, that exclusion. We can even exclude people. Perhaps we should put away our microscopes. Maybe we need to pull the plug on those for a little bit. Maybe we need to stop examining the way we think this should be, and we should start looking more through the eyes of Christ. You know, I like this statement that Aubrey uses. Church is a spiritual center for disease control. Ladies and gentlemen, there's not a single one of us that do not have sin. Every one of us do. What are we doing about it? Are we piling on? We're going to try to help each other. I said at the beginning, I'll say it again. You'll never be able to help each other if you don't know each other. If you don't spend time with each other, you'll never be able to help each other. You've got to get to that understanding. There are some strict standards, though. Even though we're trying to say we want to help and we want to encourage, and obviously we do. But don't forget Hebrews chapter 2. Jesus is the author and perfecter of our faith. The reason we do what we do is because of Jesus Christ. And he gives us some pretty strict standards. One of them is to love. One of those strict standards is that we should love. Consider 1 Corinthians 13. Now faith, hope, and love abideth. These three. But the greatest of these is to follow the rules. The greatest of these is love. The greatest of these is to look through the eyes of Jesus to find out people who need that support, not that judgment. Another one that's a strict standard is humility. See, I'm saying strict standards, but again, this is Aubrey. I'm not coming up with anything. This is Aubrey Johnson's thoughts. I'm just putting them out to you and letting you chew on them a little bit. We need to have humility. And humility, you know how that works. Ephesians chapter 5, Paul says, clothe yourselves. Clothe yourselves means embrace, drape over yourselves humility towards one another. It's not just, well, he's a humble person, but are you humble towards each other? Do you consider yourselves less important than the next person? If you do that, you're looking through the eyes of Christ. Are you willing to die for somebody? Are you willing to sacrifice for somebody? That's the humility. And then the last strict standard is consideration. Therefore, if there's any encouragement in Christ, Philippians chapter 2, if there's any consolation of love, if there's any fellowship of the Spirit, if any affection and compassion, make my joy complete by being of the same mind. Maintain the same love, united in spirit, intent on one purpose. This is what Paul says in Philippians. Do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility. Regard one another as more important than yourselves. And do not merely look out for your own interest, but for the interest of others. Have this attitude, which was also in Christ Jesus, who, although he existed in the form of man, although he existed in the form of God, he did not regard equality with God a thing to be grasped, but he emptied himself and taken on the form of a bondservant. See, that's what we should strive to be. We should be like Christ. We should be Christians. If we do that, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be in essence following the Christian's code of ethics. We're going to have humility towards each other. We're going to love each other. We're going to be able to see each other as Christ would see us. There's so much that we can learn if we will just take the time. There's so much we can build upon if we'll empty ourselves out and start looking through the eyes of Jesus. He is the archetype of encouragement. Yes, sir.
Well, I think something we learned from all the disciples that Jesus chose was he didn't choose any of the scholarly folks, right? It was all broken people. And somebody like Matthew, right? Now, he would have been very well trained, very educated, but he would have been wrong on some very serious points. And so I think sometimes, like in my life, when I start thinking about people to talk to study with, to encourage, or just to challenge with something scripturally based, right? Sometimes we like to write off like, oh, well, they've been going to Green Acres for 20 years. They're not going to come to church with me. That's not smart because they might be this close, right? They might be this close to understanding the truth the way we know it. And you sold them short because you didn't give them that push God was expecting you to give them, right? So a deacon or even a pastor or somebody like that. And a huge, just got mental explosion of the Apostle Paul, right? Which one of those first century Christians would have said, I'm going to go evangelize the Apostle Paul? No, they didn't say that. They thought they would die, right? But the Lord himself had better plans for Paul. And he has better plans for all of us if we're just willing to do what it takes.
Well, and Eric, taking that same thought process with Paul, when Christ appeared to him on the road to Damascus, and Saul turned his life around, everybody was anxious to have Paul over for supper, weren't they? No. Are you kidding me? That guy's been throwing us in prison. Keep him at an arm's distance. Don't turn your back on him. And who did it take to talk to the church and say, Paul is on our side? Who was it? Barnabas, the son of encouragement. Barnabas, the one who said, we need to do this. Encouragement is huge, ladies and gentlemen. And it's not something I can just turn on and turn off. I can't do that. Not if I want to be a child of God. You ready for your homework assignment? This is going to be a good one. I want you to encourage your closest neighbor. It may be Wilson. It may be the person that lives next door to you. Or it could be the person sitting beside you. Whether that's your spouse or your son or your friend. And if it's your spouse or your son, it probably is your friend. But encourage your closest neighbor. That's what I'm asking you to do. I thought it was interesting. I've said this every time, and I'm not going to stop saying it. When you consider the encouragement, you have to ask yourself, what will I do and how will I do it? If you don't ask that question and say, well, I'm going to encourage so-and-so, and you never ask how you're going to do it, it won't get done. And it doesn't have to be grandiose. It could be something that's small. I came across this recently. This isn't from Aubrey. This is from my mind, so it's not near as good as his. But I was even thinking about when we put up our fences around the house. Let me ask you a question, because I've had to think this through. And you may not need a fence. But if you do need a fence up, do you put the smooth side out to your neighbors? Or do you give them the railings? Do you keep the pretty side for your house? Or do you put the pretty side out so folks can see that? And I know there's some things, and Daniel could probably help me with that, because as a real estate person, you want to make sure people can't crawl up the rails to get into your backyard. I understand that. But my thoughts are, do you want to let people see the best? Or do you say the best for myself? And that's the idea, the point I want to encourage you with as you encourage your neighbor. Give them your best. And you know, it could very well be something like this morning. If you don't park your car in the garage, you got it this morning, you probably had frost on your windshield. Get up early enough, you can go to your neighbor's and scrape his windshield off. If, when we were in Colorado, we had this, I don't know if we have it down here because we haven't been here through a winter. If you've got snow and you're shoveling your walk, go ahead and go and shovel their walk too. You see, there's ways that we can encourage our neighbors. That may be the first step.